Today we're taking a look at relative pronouns. I'm just going to use my notes because it's pretty much the exact same thing in your book, and I don't feel that there's a reason to waste your time. So what we're talking about today is relative pronouns, so we're still in that category of pronouns. Today we're taking a look, or in your notes, this should be in your outline letter F. So the definition of a relative pronoun is relative pronouns are used to relate one idea in a sentence to another. So we're connecting something, or we're showing that there's a relationship there, okay? It introduces an adjective clause and connects it to the word that the clause describes. Now, you know what an adjective is. An adjective describes a noun or a pronoun, right? So don't freak out over these fancy words. Adjective clause. Clause just means there's more than one word. Now, there are several words that are going to be used to describe something, okay? So it introduces, we know then it's going to be at the beginning of the clause, of an adjective clause. That means that we're going to describe a noun or pronoun and connects it to the word that the clause describes, okay? So relative pronouns can be considered like a connector, not a conjunction, but kind of connecting the noun to the phrase that we're using to describe that noun. And you see under my lowercase a, there are only 5 relative pronouns. And yet you will find these in other categories of pronouns too, but for relative, when they're connecting, they're relating it to something else, there are only 5 that we have to worry about. So let me show you some examples down here at the bottom of the page. The first sentence, we read a book that contained an account of the settlers' experiences. Well, out of the 5 choices, I can identify the pronoun that, so I'm going to highlight it. Okay. Now, let me show you what they mean by an adjective clause. That clause, it's going to be several words, and it's going to describe something. So the entire clause, I'm going to use parentheses here, that contained an account of the settler's experience. It's an adjective, so it's describing a noun or pronoun. So let's go look at the beginning of our sentence and figure out, well, what is it describing? I see the pronoun we, read a, no, those aren't pronouns. I see book is a noun. That contained an account of the settler's experiences. That is describing, it's not describing we, but it's describing book. So the relative pronoun that is tying all of this information to help us describe the book. So you could say book is the antecedent to that, and this whole phrase is considered an adjective. So I'm going to write that. Right there. All right, so let's take a look at the next one. The settlers who had written it described their hardships. All right, so first off, we need to select one of these pronouns out of the list. See the word who. Who had written it described their hardships. Well, we've got 2 words to choose from, either the or settlers. So I'm going to go with settlers because the other one's not a noun. So we're talking about, we're describing the settlers who had written it. So I'm going to put a parentheses around the adjective clause. Is that describing settlers? It sure is. Oh, and I actually goofed up. I need to include my pronoun. Settlers who had written it. That's describing the settlers. It's not the settlers who had chopped down a tree. It's not the settlers who had fought the Indians. It's the settlers who had written it, which we know from the first example means the book. So this is my relative pronoun tying to settlers. Now for the last one, let's take a look here. The winter, which they knew would be harsh, was fast approaching. Okay, let's take a look at our list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see the word which. And this one's actually already set off by commas. The winter, which they knew would be hard, so that's describing the winter, was fast approaching. The rest of this is verb, that's the predicate, that's the end of the sentence. I know it's describing the winter. So which is our pronoun and winter is the antecedent. We know that this is describing and talking about winter. So that is our lesson on relative pronouns. They're used at the beginning of an adjective clause. An adjective describes nouns or pronouns.